The Red Keep still smelled of smoke. Years had passed since the Blackfire Rebellion had been crushed, and yet the scent of scorched stone lingered, as if the dragonfire had etched itself into the bones of the castle. King Aerys II Targaryen, crowned. Victor rather than mad, sat taller on the Iron Throne, his silver hair grown long, wild and twisted with gold thread. His eyes, once bright with madness, now glowed with something far more dangerous, certainty he had won. Robert Baratheon's head had been paraded through the streets of King's Landing, still wearing the stag helmet dented from Rhaegar's hammer. Ned Stark had vanished. Rumor had it he was rotting in the black cells below the Red Keep. Jon Arryn was burned alive in his ancestral seat at the Eyrie. And Lyanna Stark? She had been brought to the Red Keep in chains, her hair shorn, her belly heavy with child. Now 16 years later, the realm bore the weight of that victory. A Dragon King still ruled, and Westeros had never truly known peace since Sir Vyron Waters stood at the edge of the throne room, hidden behind a crimson column, his white cloak blending with the marble. A bastard born of the king's lust, he was no true Targaryen, yet he bore their fire in his blood. His mother, a maid of dawn, had perished birthing him, and he'd grown in silence within the shadows of court. He was known to few, noticed by none, but he saw everything. Today he watched Prince Rhaegar, the king's golden son, kneel before the throne, his violet eyes lowered, his polished armor reflecting the flame of the torches. "The rebellion has left scars, father," Rhaegar said calmly. "The Reach trembles, and the North breeds whispers. We cannot rule forever by fear alone." King Aerys leaned forward, his nails scraping along the blade of a melted longsword fused to the Iron Throne. Blood ran down his fingers, unnoticed, or unbothered. "Fear is forever, Rhaegar," he hissed, "and so long as dragons soar, men will kneel. Do not mistake kindness for strength. Look what love did to you." The words cut deeper than steel. Varon's hand clenched around the pommel of his sword as he watched the silent war between father and son. The truth was a poisonous secret known only to a few. Lyanna had died birthing Rhaegar's child. The boy, named Aemon, had been taken in secret, raised by silent sisters within Dragonstone's forgotten spire. And now that boy was 16. Varon had met him once, a sharp, pale boy with too many questions and eyes that missed nothing. The realm thought the rebellion ended when Robert fell, but in truth it had merely gone underground, bleeding into the bones of the next generation. Far in the north, beneath the whispering snows of Winterfell, Lady Sansa Stark sat before a frost-bitten hearth, her fingers wrapped around a letter written in blood. Her brother Brandon had died in King's Landing. Her father had vanished. And Jon Snow, who wasn't really a Snow at all, had been taken by force, his fate unknown, but the wolf blood was stubborn. "The dragons rule the south," she whispered to the flames. "But winter belongs to us." A hooded figure stepped from the shadows. "They say the Mad King sees shadows in every mirror," said the man, voice cold as the wall. "Perhaps it's time we gave him something real to fear." Sansa met his eyes. Ser Jorah Mormont, once exiled, now a ghost, returned to the snows. His skin bore the scars of fire. His heart burned for vengeance. She unfolded a map, traced the route to King's Landing, and set it aflame. In the dungeons of the Red Keep, an old man sat chained and whispering to ghosts. His beard was a ragged mess, and his face had long forgotten. Sunlight, his name had once meant something. Ned Stark, a voice called softly from the darkness. He opened one eye. A boy stood there. Silver hair, violet eyes, fire in his blood. "You knew my mother," the boy said. "You loved her. I want to know why she died for me." Ned stared, heart thudding for the first time in years. "Aemon," he whispered. "Gods help us all." Rain fell in thick, greasy sheets over King's Landing, washing filth from the cobbled streets, but never touching the rot that had taken root in the heart of the Red Keep. The city still bustled. Merchants shouted. Children laughed. Gold cloaks beat pickpockets in alleyways, but there was a silence underneath it all, a hush, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Aemon Targaryen moved like a shadow through the library's maze of ancient tomes, his pale fingers tracing the cracked spines of Valyrian texts. No one knew him as Aemon here. He was the page boy, another quiet face among the servants, a bastard son forgotten in a castle ruled by flame. But in truth, he was fire waiting to awaken. He had visited Ned Stark again last night. The old man had told him stories of honor, of love, of a broken kingdom bought with blood. He'd wept once, quietly, when he spoke of Lyanna. Your mother was wild, boy, not like a southern lady. She was a wolf. Aemon never knew her, but now he couldn't stop imagining her scream as she gave him life in the Tower of Joy. And he couldn't stop thinking of his father, Rhaegar, kneeling before a mad king, stripped of pride, stripped of love. Valar Morghulis, a soft voice whispered. He turned. Maester Aros stood behind him, a withered man with ink-stained hands and a crooked spine. His eyes gleamed with secrets. You've read the scroll, he said, nodding to the open parchment on the table. Aemon nodded. The prophecy, the prince that was promised. A tired lie, the Maester said, or a dangerous truth. Tell me, child, do you believe you are him? I don't know what I believe, Aemon replied, but I know something is wrong in this kingdom. My grandfather is not a king. He's a monster wearing a crown. The old man leaned in closer. Then perhaps it's time to choose. A different story, one where monsters burn. Far to the west, the Riverlands had grown restless. Ravens flew from Harrenhal, black wings bearing darker words. Lord Hoster Tully, now a bent-backed relic of the past, had died quietly in his sleep. But his son, Edmure, had sent no message of loyalty to the Iron Throne. Instead, a silent envoy was spotted leaving toward Riverrun's crumbling gate, an envoy wearing the direwolf of House Stark. At the Twins, Lord Walder Frey sat twitching in his chair, watching sons and daughters bicker over his fortune. He was older, weaker, but his memory sharp as ever. The North stirs, he croaked. The wolf girl sends letters. She thinks me a fool. He turned to a tall figure in a black cloak beside him. You gave me your word, Bolton. I expect your knives to keep it. Ramsay Bolton grinned like a dog smelling blood. I never forget a promise, Lord Frey, and I never leave a wolf breathing long. In Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen stood alone on the wind-swept battlements, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. She had never left the island. She had never married. Her dragons, if she ever had any, had died as eggs, cold and lifeless in a stone nursery. Her brother Viserys had taken the seat at her side years ago, whispering poison into her ears and spitting bile at the world. He wanted her docile, broken, regal. She had complied until recently. I dreamed of fire last night, she said aloud, as her handmaid combed silver hair from her face. Dreams don't change the world, princess, the maid whispered. Daenerys turned. Her eyes, once soft, now burned. No, she said, but dragons do. In the black cells, Ned Stark spoke for hours, sometimes in riddles, sometimes in half-truths, but always with purpose. You are your father's son, he told Aemon, but you must not become him. Rhaegar wanted to save the world, but he let the world burn instead. Aemon stared at him. So what am I supposed to do? Ned leaned closer, eyes glinting in the dim torchlight. You must become something new, not prince, not king, something more. Gather those who still remember truth. Wake the wolves, stir the lions, light the fire again. Aemon's hands were trembling as he stood. And if they come for me, then you burn them all. From the east, ships were coming. From the north, riders were moving. And in the Red Keep, King Aerys slept beneath silk and fire, whispering. In his dreams, his hand clutched around the hilt of an old rusted blade. "The fire speaks," he mumbled, but he was too deaf to hear what it truly said. Snow fell in silent spirals across the wolfswood, coating every branch and pine needle in a thick white hush. Deep in the woods, far from Winterfell's crumbling gates, a small campfire crackled, its flames hidden beneath a cloak of pine boughs. Around it stood figures cloaked in grey, their faces shadowed but their eyes sharp. They weren't soldiers, not exactly. They were ghosts. Sansa Stark stood among them. Gone was the girl who once dreamt of golden nights and lemon cakes. Sansa wore hardened leather, a fur-lined cloak stained from travel, and a dagger on her belt carved with a dire wolf's snarl. Beside her, Arya adjusted her blade without saying a word, her expression unreadable. She had returned from across the narrow sea with silence in her steps and names on her list. "River Run has pledged its banners," Sansa said. "So has Bear Island, even some from the Neck." "Still not enough," Arya muttered. "The dragons. Hold the south. If we ride now, we die in fire." "We don't need the south," Sansa replied coldly. "We need the right names, and one of them is in King's Landing." She reached into her cloak and produced a scroll, sealed with wax black. As pitch, she tossed it into the fire. "What was that?" Arya asked. "A promise," Sansa said, "to a prince who doesn't know what he is yet." In King's Landing, Prince Rhaegar stood in the Tower of the Hand, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed over the city. Even from here, the smoke rising from Flea Bottom made the skyline look sick. His dreams were filled with fire lately. Dragon, wings over the sept of Baelor, rivers running red, his children choking on ash. He had 2 sons. His official heir, Baelon, was only 10 but already cruel. Viserys trained the boy with coldness and fury, whispering into his ear that softness would destroy him. And then there was Aemon, the hidden one, the one the world wasn't meant to know. Rhaegar had spoken to him only once in the shadows of the Godswood, where whispers died among weirwood leaves. "You should have lived free," he had told the boy, "and you should have fought," the boy replied. Rhaegar hadn't had an answer then. Now he watched a raven circle the tower once, then dart off toward the west. War was coming. He could feel it in the wind. Daenerys sat alone at a long table, fingers drumming on wood. Viserys paced behind her, agitated, muttering about bloodlines and thrones and loyalty. "You should be in the capital," he snapped, "not sulking in this cursed rock." "I'm not sulking," Daenerys said. "I'm remembering," Viserys scowled. "Remembering what? That our house is destined to rule? The dragons don't bow?" "I'm remembering Mother," she said softly, "and how she screamed giving birth to me, while Father locked the door and prayed for a son instead." That silenced him. She stood, brushing past him, walking out toward the dragon pit. Except it wasn't empty anymore. 3 eggs sat nestled. In blackened coals, gifts from Essos, bought with whispered promises and unspoken deals. And now one of them was cracking. Daenerys knelt, her breath catching as firelight danced across the shell. "Come on, little one," she whispered. "Wake up." Aemon stood on the ramparts of the Red Keep, cloaked in servant's garb, but beneath the collar was a blade forged of Valyrian steel. Dark Sister, recovered from the crypts below. He had stolen it the night before. No one noticed. No one ever noticed him. But tonight, that would change. Below, the gates opened to admit a caravan from Old Town, maesters and scribes sent to advise the crown. Among them walked a woman with grey eyes and ash-blonde hair. She looked up, met his gaze, then smiled. He recognized her from the north. Sansa Stark. She had come for him. Atop the Iron Throne, King Aerys dreamed of wildfire, oceans of green flame, cities turned to dust, screams echoing under a red sky. In his sleep he laughed, but across the Seven Kingdoms others were moving. In the Vale, Jon Royce was gathering steel. In the Reach, House Hightower held closed council with strange priests in black. And in Dawn, Oberyn Martell sharpened his spear and swore vengeance not just for Elia, but for every child burned under the shadow of House Targaryen. The realm was shifting, the air was thick with omen and tension, and somewhere, in the still of night, a dragon screamed. The raven arrived at dawn, its wings beat against the shutters of the old rookery in Winterfell, its beak clattering on the stone until Maester Luwin's tired hands reached for it. But Luwin was gone, dead for years. Now, in his place stood Maester Elric, young and sharp-eyed, and he frowned when he cracked the seal, a black wax imprint, a seven-pointed star broken in half. He brought the message straight to Sansa. She read it in silence, her eyes narrowing with every line. "They're calling it the Sermon of the Broken Star," she said, handing it to Arya. "Some high septon, and down in Old Town, preaching that the Targaryens are cursed by the gods, that no man born of fire should wear a crown." Arya raised an eyebrow. "And people believe it." Sansa gave a cold smile. "They want to." The truth was, Westeros was starving. For food, yes, but also for justice, for hope, for change. The king's taxes had drained the riverlands dry. The Iron Throne's agents took first sons for service and second sons for their gold. The south basked in wealth, while the north buried its dead beneath deeper snows each year. Now rebellion wasn't just whispered in smoky taverns, it was preached from pulpits, and Sansa knew that once the faith turned against a king, blood always followed. In the belly of the Red Keep, Prince Aemon moved with purpose. Disguised in plain robes, he followed the sewer tunnels out of the castle and into the forgotten Undercity, where the bricks wept and rats ran with no fear. This was where the lowborn plotted, where tongues spoke freely, and where the real truth lingered like mold. There, in a damp wine cellar beneath a burned-down inn, he met his first rebel cell. 3 men and 1 woman, all in black, all scarred by the realm. "You're the prince?" one man asked, voice skeptical. "I'm a prince," Aemon answered, "but not the kind you're used to." He reached into his cloak and placed Dark Sister on the table. They stared. One man crossed himself. The woman just nodded. "You'll need more than a sword," she said. "You'll need dragons." I'm working on that," Aemon said. And for the first time, he smiled. A dragonstone firelight danced across the stone floor as Daenerys stood alone before the cracking egg. The other 2 remained silent, dead as they'd always been. But this one pulsed. A fissure spread through its surface like a spider's web. Then, with a soft sound, the shell burst open and a creature slid free, slick, glistening, and alive. It was no larger than a dog, its wings still curled tight against its body. But it turned to Daenerys instantly. Its eyes were red, its scales black as night. She knelt, and it climbed her arm, wrapped itself around her neck and purred like a dying flame. She whispered something in Valyrian, and the dragon blinked, understanding her. From behind her, Viserys hissed, "You... what have you done?" Daenerys turned. "I woke it! It should have been mine!" he shouted. "I am the blood of the dragon." "No," Daenerys said softly. "You are its echo." He raised his hand to strike her, but the dragon hissed, and flames burst from its mouth, searing Viserys' shoulder. He screamed, and for the first time in years, Daenerys smiled. In the Riverlands, Edmure Tully watched his banners ride. They weren't knights. Most were farmers, blacksmiths, boys barely old enough to shave. But their eyes burned with loyalty to House Stark, and their mouths spoke the name of the hidden prince. "Aemon," they whispered, "Aemon Targaryen, the last light in a broken world." And behind them came older names still, House Blackwood, House Mallister, even the remnants of the Brotherhood without banners. A rebellion was coming, not for thrones or gold, but for the soul of the realm. Inside the Red Keep, King Aerys was awake again. His fingers twitched. His eyes darted, his tongue mumbled words not meant for sane ears. They plotted, they crawled through the walls, the boy, the wolf girl, the egg cracks. His attendants stayed silent. One wrong word, and his fire would find them. He stood, suddenly hands outstretched. "Burn them all," he said. "Let the skies bleed. Let the dragons scream again. They want war. I'll give them fire." And somewhere, deep in the vaults beneath the keep, barrels of wildfire waited. Silent. Green. Hungry. Hungry. The bells of King's Landing rang at dusk, not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not for peace. They rang because smoke had begun to rise in the east, thick, oily black clouds curling above the city like serpents. Fires had broken out in Flea, Bottom, and by the time the gold cloaks arrived, it was already too late. 2 tax offices, a barracks, and a food storehouse were gone, burned to ash. On the walls, Prince Rhaegar watched in silence. The smoke reminded him of the trident, of men, screaming as the dragon banners fell into blood. He had hoped never to see war again, but hope was for fools. Behind him, Lord Varys emerged from the shadows like a wraith, his soft hands folded neatly within silk sleeves. "It begins," he murmured. "The spark has taken hold." "Where?" Rhaegar asked. "Everywhere," Varys said. "And nowhere. That is the danger of true rebellion. It does not wear a crown or wave a banner. It seeps into men's hearts like rot." Rhaegar turned away, lips pressed thin. "Then I must make a choice." "You're already too late to choose," Varys said. "The fire is here. All you can do now is survive it." In the ruins of an old sept on the edge of the Blackwater, Aemon Targaryen stood before a dozen masked rebels. His voice did not tremble. He had learned to speak like a prince. "The crown has grown fat on our blood," he said. "They've crushed dissent with fire and silenced truth with blades. But not anymore. Not with me." A man stepped forward, weathered and bald, his face half burned from dragonflame years ago. "And what makes you any different, boy?" "I am not my father," Aemon said. "And I will never be my grandfather." He unsheathed Dark Sister and drove it into the table, wood splintering beneath Valyrian steel. "I'm here to end the reign of dragons, even if I burn with them." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of someone kneeling, then another and another, until they all did. Far across the sea, in the dark depths of Dragonstone, Daenerys walked through fire. Literally. The chamber was thick with heat, the walls glowing red from the flames that danced wildly around her. The baby dragon coiled protectively on her shoulder, but did not stop her. She stepped barefoot into the coals, into the center of the 3 eggs. A second egg cracked, then the third, and when the flames parted, she stood surrounded by 3 living dragons. Smoke curled from her skin, but she was untouched. The fire had claimed her, and it had not consumed her. Viserys watched from above, shaking with fury, clutching his scorched arm. "They'll never follow you," he spat. "They're mine. By blood, by right." Daenerys looked up at him, and the largest of the dragons spread its wings. A low rumble filled the chamber. Viserys took a step back, then another, then ran. Daenerys didn't speak. She didn't have to. They subtu. Dragons had chosen. In the Vale, Jon Royce marched through the gates of the moon with 500 men at his back. Word from the north had come with a single sentence written in Sansa Stark's hand. "The wolves howl. It is time." And the Vale answered. From the bloody gate to the fingers, banners unfurled, crescent moons, stone hammers, and old sigils. Long, silent Littlefinger was dead, pushed from the Ares moon door months ago by a silent girl with a dagger and no name. Now the Vale no longer whispered. It roared. In the Red Keep, King Aerys stood in his throne room with his pyromancers. They were pale, shaking men in green robes reeking of smoke and madness. "The tunnels are ready," one muttered. "The vaults beneath the city are full. One spark, and the fire will take them all." Good, Aerys said. Then let it burn. Let the traitors choke on ash. Rhaegar entered behind him. You would murder the city to spite your enemies? Aerys turned slowly, eyes blazing. I would save it, boy, purge it like flesh from bone. This city is a plague, and I am the cure. You're not a cure, Rhaegar said, voice shaking. You're the disease, Aerys lunged, but Rhaegar drew his blade, steel flashing between them, and for a moment king and prince stood face to face. Not father and son, but fire and fire, ready to devour each other. In the night, a single raven flew. It carried no sigil. Only a scrap of parchment scrawled in a child's hand. It read, The true king is here. His name is Aemon. He has dark sister, and he is coming. The winds howled across the 7 kingdoms, and for the first time in years, the people began to hope. Storms battered the narrow sea, as if the gods themselves were at war. Daenerys stood at the prow of a black-sailed ship, her silver hair whipping behind her, her dragons circling above in wide, vigilant arcs. The wind howled, but her face was calm. Behind her, a fleet of 30 ships, all stolen, bartered, or pledged by exiled captains, cut across the waves like blades. The sails bore no sigils. Not yet. She hadn't come to claim her father's throne. She had come to burn the legacy of madness from the world. Viserys had vanished in the night, stealing a horse and fleeing inland toward the Reach. She let him go. His war was over. Hers was just beginning. In the Riverlands, the rebel army gathered like a storm cloud. Edmure Tully rode at the front, dressed not as a lord but as a commander, grizzled, determined, and burning with quiet fury. Beside him, the Blackwoods flew their ravens, and the Lannisters brought their ships up the Green Fork. More joined daily, broken knights, angry farmers, even hedge wizards from the woods, speaking prophecies in broken tongues. But all of them spoke one name with rising conviction: Aemon. When the boy himself finally arrived, flanked by silent guards and bearing Dark Sister across his back, they knelt. Not to a crown, not to a bloodline, to an idea. Aemon climbed atop a makeshift dais, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. My name is Aemon Targaryen, he said, born of fire but not forged by it. I do not come to claim my grandfather's madness. I come to end it, he paused, to break the wheel, to make a realm not ruled by dragons but by truth. And from the crowd a roar rose, one that had not been heard since the days of the rebellion. This was not Robert Baratheon's war. This was something older and far more dangerous. At King's Landing, the walls bled soldiers, the gold cloaks, patrolled in double shifts, crossbows loaded, siege oil warming in cauldrons above every gate. No one spoke openly anymore. Not in taverns, not even in brothels. Every whisper might be treason. Every glance might mean death. Rhaegar knew he was running out of time. He'd begun sending ravens in secret, one to Jon Connington in the Stormlands, one to Dorne, and one to the north. He didn't know if they would answer, but he had to try, because if he couldn't stop his father from lighting the wildfire, there might be nothing left to save. Aerys sat in the dark now. He no longer bathed, no longer spoke in full sentences. He just stared at the throne, at the flames, at the faces of his pyromancers who worshipped him like a god. They will betray me, he mumbled. Even Rhaegar, even my own son, they all want my fire. A new figure stood at his side now, Sir Jaime Lannister, younger than most, but cold-eyed, watchful. A Kingsguard in name, but something colder in his heart. He had seen what happened to those who spoke sense to the king. Now he waited, silent, patient, and afraid. Because he, more than anyone, understood what wildfire really did, and he could feel it beneath the keep, beneath the streets, waiting. In the north, Sansa's banner unfurled at last, the direwolf of House Stark, black against white. With Arya riding beside her and the veil at her back, they crossed the neck into the riverlands, joining the rebel host before the moon had waned again. Sansa rode at the head, armored and silent, her red hair braided like a crown. When she dismounted before Aemon, their eyes met. "You look like him," she said softly. "I'm not him," Aemon replied. "I know," Sansa said. "That's why. I'm here." Across the sea, at the mouth of Blackwater Bay, Daenerys made landfall. The dragon Varax soared above the trees, belching fire over the treetops and scattering birds for miles. Small folk watched from cliffs and hid their children. But she didn't attack the city. She turned north toward the rebel army. Toward the prince they called Hope, the woman they called Stormborn, was ready to meet the boy born of fire and snow, and neither of them trusted the other. But both knew, if they did not unite, the world would end in green flame and madness within. The walls of the Red Keep, Rhaegar stood alone in the Sept of Baelor, praying to gods he barely believed in. "Forgive me," he whispered, "for loving her, for losing her, for everything that came after." He heard a footstep behind him. "Varys, they have arrived," the spider said. "The wolves, the dragon girl, the bastard prince." Rhaegar turned, weary. "Then Westeros has a choice," he said. "No, my prince," Varys replied. "You do. You do." The field outside Harrenhal was soaked in mud, blood, and fog. Morning light struggled to pierce the haze as two armies faced each other across the rolling plain. On one side, the rebels under Aemon Targaryen and Lady Sansa Stark, bolstered by the Riverlands, Vale, and northern houses. On the other, the Blackfire Legion, loyalists to King Aerys, sent to crush the uprising before it reached King's Landing. And above them all, dragons circled. Aemon had seen Daenerys for the first time the night before. She hadn't spoken when she arrived at the rebel camp, only landed her dragons at the edge of the field and dismounted in silence. But when they'd finally met face to face under the flapping tents and guarded stares of lords who had only ever feared her house, they had spoken like people too old for their years. "You're the fire that never left," Aemon said. "And you're the one that should have been burned," she replied. Neither smiled, but neither drew a blade either. Instead, they walked side by side into the command tent. Now, on the field, Daenerys stood beside him again, her dragons waiting in the sky like living gods. Aemon rode no beast. He wielded only Dark Sister and the fire that had grown in his blood. Across the field, Lord Celtigar, a pale old man with the king's favor and a mind twisted by years of court, bellowed orders. The Blackfire Legion began its advance. "They'll push hard," Daenerys said. "We hold them, or we die here." Aemon drew his sword. "Then we hold." The horns blew, and the last sons of fire charged into war. Steel clashed like thunder. The Blackfire Legion was larger, better equipped, and more brutal than anything the rebels had faced. But it was also slower, bloated from victory and drunk on the delusion of invincibility. The rebels fought like wolves, scattered, lean, and desperate. Sansa's northern shield wall held the center. Arya cut through the flanks like a shadow. Then the sky screamed. Varax dived from the clouds, flames spilling from his mouth in a searing arc that turned 100 men to ash in seconds. The loyalists panicked, screamed, broke, but from the loyalist side came a roar in answer. The king had sent a dragon after all, Rhaegar's dragon, old, massive, chained for years, and now loosed. It had no name anymore, only fury. It struck Daenerys' dragon mid-air, talons tearing scale, teeth ripping wing. The beasts crashed into the trees with an explosion of fire and bone. On the ground, men froze. The gods were fighting above them. Daenerys turned toward the sound, blood on her cheek. "I have to go," she said. "Go," Aemon told her, "but come back." In the chaos, a second battle unfolded in the woods behind the rebel lines. Arya Stark faced her first ghost. Sir Gregor Clegane, risen from exile and madness, sent by Cersei Lannister to kill the girl with no name. He was a monster, but she was death. It was not a long fight. When Arya emerged, her blade was red. Her eyes were dry, and the mountain would never rise again. Atop a hill, Sansa Stark raised her banner, direwolf and flame, and charged with the Knights of the Vale into the broken flank of the Blackfire Legion. It was not her place to lead the charge, but she had waited too long to watch others do the bleeding. She cut through 2 men herself. When she fell, it was from exhaustion, not a wound. And when she stood again, the enemy had broken. They were retreating, fleeing. The field was theirs, but the price was steep, thousands dead, dragons wounded, and the war far from over. That night, beneath the broken towers of Harrenhal, Aemon sat alone with a bottle of wine and a letter in his hand. It was from Ned Stark, old, smudged, written before the war, meant for Lyanna's child. Should he ever live long enough to read it? I did what I thought was right. I kept you hidden, because the world would not have spared you. But now the world needs you, not as a prince, not even as a Targaryen, but as someone better than any of us ever were. Aemon folded the letter, closed his eyes. He did not feel like a prince. He felt like a weapon. In King's Landing, Rhaegar stood beside the Iron Throne. He had not yet sat on it. He wasn't sure he ever would. Behind him, Jaime Lannister whispered, "If you want to stop him, now's the time." Aerys had ordered the wildfire moved. The pyromancers were restless. The fuse had been lit, but Rhaegar just said, "Not yet," and Jaime narrowed his eyes. He had heard that before, from men who waited too long. And below the city, the green fire began to rise. The bells rang again in King's Landing, not for victory, not for mourning, but for fire. Wildfire. The sky above the city shimmered green as the first explosion tore through the lower districts. The smoke rose like a serpent, wrapping its coils around the Sept of Baelor, before another blast shook the very foundations of the Red Keep. Aerys Targaryen was laughing, sitting beneath the Iron Throne, blackened fingers wrapped around a dagger, and a torch, his crown sliding crookedly on his head. He laughed like a man who had already died. "They thought they could take my city," he wheezed. "They thought they could take me, but they'll get ash, only ash." The pyromancers knelt before him like priests, their robes soaked in oil, their mouths chanting in low, eerie tones, "Burn them all." And in the shadows behind the throne, Sir Jaime Lannister, Kingsguard, son of Tywin, Knight of Hollow Vows, stepped forward. He watched Aerys raise the torch toward the last barrel of wildfire, stored beneath the very throne itself, and then he struck. His blade slid into the king's back with a sound like tearing silk. Aerys gasped, then gurgled, then fell, and for the second time in his life, Jaime Lannister became a kingslayer. At the gates, Aemon and Sansa arrived to smoke and screams. The small folk were fleeing in all directions, many burned, many dying. The city guards had abandoned their posts, but the gates stood open. Aemon didn't wait. He rode straight through the gate. Carnage, Dark Sister drawn, shouting for the rebels to follow. Behind him came the Riverlands host, the Vale Riders, and Arya already inside the walls, slipping through alleyways like death itself. The streets ran with blood, but the throne room was already quiet. Jaime Lannister stood alone at the base of the Iron Throne, blood drying on his armor, and eyes dull from what he'd just done. He looked up at Aemon. "It's done." "Where's Rhaegar?" Aemon demanded. Jaime shook his head. "Gone, left before the fire, said he was going north." Aemon nodded slowly, then looked at the throne. For the first time in centuries, it was empty. He did not sit. In the ashes of the Great Sept, Daenerys walked through bodies. The fire had taken half the city, but it had also ended the reign of the Mad King. Her dragons circled above, wings casting long shadows over the ruins. She met Aemon in the courtyard by the ruined gardens. They didn't speak at first. When they finally did, it was Daenerys who asked, "Will you take the throne?" "I don't want it," Aemon said, "but they'll demand it. Then they'll be disappointed." Daenerys looked up at the Red Keep, her expression unreadable. "I could take it," she said softly. "I have the dragons. I have the blood." "But not the trust," Aemon said. "Not yet." "And you?" "I have the name," he said, "but that's not enough either." They stood in silence. Then Daenerys offered her hand. Together then, Aemon took it, and for once fire did not burn. Sansa Stark returned to Winterfell in spring. She was crowned Warden of the North beneath the Heart Tree, with Arya at her side and the snow beginning to melt. The North had no king. It didn't need one. It had a wolf, and the wolves remember. In the Reach, the Faith declared a new Septon, a man who had once walked among the rebels and now preached peace, not fire. The people called him the Septon of the Ashes. In Dawn, Oberyn Martell took no crown, but promised justice would be served. His daughter would study the law. His armies would never again serve dragons blindly. In the Stormlands, Jon Connington returned a broken man, haunted by what he'd done in Rhaegar's name. And Rhaegar himself, he was never seen again. Some say he wandered into the north, seeking forgiveness that would never come. Others say he drank poison in a quiet inn and died beneath a nameless tree. Aemon never spoke of him. Years later, in the rebuilt city of King's Landing, a council ruled. Daenerys sat at its head with Aemon beside her, not as king, but as the one who ended kings. The Iron Throne was melted down. Its swords were reforged into ploughs, bridges, and monuments, and in the square where it once stood, a statue was raised, not of a king, but of a mother holding a child. The plaque beneath it read, "For the future, not ruled by dragons, but by those brave enough to rise against them." The Targaryens never fell, but in the end they were broken anyway, and from the ruin something new was born, not a dynasty, but a chance.